In Rio Branco, in the western Amazon, there is a bedroom left exactly as it was found. Every wall, every section of the ceiling, the floor under your feet painted by hand. A 2-meter painted statue at the center, robed, holding an open book. This channel is called the Quiet Hill, but where the unresolved waits. The bedroom belonged in 2017 to a 24-year-old psychology student named Bruno Borges. On the 27th of March 2017, he stepped out of his parents' house, got into a taxi. The next afternoon, a security camera caught a young man in a t-shirt and shorts running back toward the house. He did not arrive. The family by then was opening the locked bedroom door. They had to break the lock. It was a room he had been preparing with the help of 3 people, intensively for the previous 24 days while his parents were away. Before we go inside it, one fact needs to be on the table. Bruno Borges came back. It 137 days after the disappearance, on the 11th of August 2017, he walked into this is what the room was, and this is the case of the Bruno Borges room. Chapter 1. Rio Branco, Acre is a Brazilian state about the size of Greece in the far western Amazon, bordering Peru and Bolivia. It was bought from Bolivia in 1903, in the middle of the rubber boom, by the Treaty of Petropod. Rio Branco, the capital, is a low-rise city of about 400,000 people. Hot all year, 4 hours by air from São Paulo. Almost every national story that breaks here breaks the same way, as a curiosity from somewhere most of the country has. The Borges family lived in an upper middle-class neighborhood. The father, Atos Borges, was an architect. The mother, Denise Borges, kept the house and was openly articulately religious, Catholic with a private devotion to Nossa Senhora Aparecida, the patron saint of Brazil. This would matter later. There were 3 children, Gabriela, the eldest, Bruno and Rodrigo, twins, 24 years old in 2017. Bruno was studying psychology at the local Faculdade Barão do Rio Branco. The family, by every account given afterwards, was warm and ordinary in the way upper middle-class families in regional Brazil. Bruno was the quiet one. He had grown up reading. He had read Giordano Bruno, the 16th century Italian Dominican friar and philosopher. He had read books on Hermeticism, on Kabbalah, on what in Portuguese is called the Espiritismo, the Kardecist Spiritism, widely practiced across Brazil. He had been working, his mother later told reporters, since at least 2013 on what he called O Projeto, the project he was going to write. He had told her, working books that would change humanity in a good way. Denise believed him. Chapter 2. 24 days. On the 1st of March 2017, Atos and Denise Borges left Rio Branco for a holiday. They were gone the entire month. Bruno had told them the previous year that he wanted to use the time to work intensively on the project. The family understood the room would be repainted. Bruno also told them he would be receiving help. The help they later turned out was 3 people. His twins friend Marcelo Ferreira, another friend named Mario Gaiotti, also spelled in some Brazilian press as Marcio, and his cousin Eduardo Borges, in several early reports called Eduardo Veloso, the same person. Veloso is the maternal surname. The cousin had, at some earlier point, transferred 20,000 reais to Bruno to help finance the project. The 2 friends would later be revealed to have signed contracts with Bruno, entitling them to a share of book sales. For 24 days, the 4 of them worked in the room. The picture was carried out piece by piece through Mario Gaiotti's house: the bed, the wardrobe, the rack, the desk. The walls, ceiling, and floor were primed white. Then they were covered. Bruno painted. He wrote, he ordered 3 white tunics from a local seamstress. He commissioned a sculptor named, in some accounts, Marcos Hernandez, to cast and paint a 2-meter statue of Giordano Bruno, in monk's habit, holding an open book on a square plinth. The statue cost 7,000 reais. The cousin had paid for it. It was installed in the center of the room. The neighbors heard them working. Of the content of what they were doing, the neighbors knew nothing. The Borges parents in São Paulo and then in the south heard nothing. Bruno had asked them not to read, and they had agreed. On the 27th of March, they came home. They had lunch with Bruno. He seemed normal. Chapter 3, the room. They had to break the lock. Athos Borges later told Fantástico, the Sunday night television news magazine on TV Global, what he saw inside. I went in there and I didn't see the bed. I didn't see anything. In the center of the room, the painted statue Giordano Bruno Toto, more than 2 meters tall on its plinth, robed around the statue, on every wall, on the ceiling, and on the floor, a continuous covering of hand-painted text and diagram. The text was in 5 different scripts, 5 different cipher alphabets, all of them invented or adapted from existing systems, all of them substitution ciphers of various kinds. Embedded with the cipher were unencrypted Portuguese, Latin, and Italian fragments, quotations attributed to Leonardo da Vinci, lines from the Old Testament, lines from Giordano Bruno's own dialogues, and lines that, on later inspection, turned out to be Bruno Borges' own. There were geometric diagrams, concentric circles, pentagrams, the 7 classical planets on a planetary wheel, alchemical symbols for sulfur, salt, and mercury, a tree of life in the Lurianic Kabbalah configuration. There was a large, naive self-portrait of Bruno, robed in white, being touched on the forehead by a gray-skinned, large-eyed figure. There were the 14 handwritten notebooks, leather-bound or hardback, each marked on its cover with a Roman numeral. 8 of the notebooks were complete, 6 were partially written. There was no furniture. The bed was at a friend's house. The room smelled of paint. On the desk, propped inside the hollow cardboard tube, kind architects used to roll up plans, was the key. Or rather the keys. Bruno had left in plain sight hand-drawn substitution tables mapping his cipher symbols back to the Latin alphabet. He had not hidden the answer. He had left the answer next to the question. The phone Bruno had carried out was turned off in the early evening of the 27th of March. It would not register on a cell tower again. On the 28th of March at 14:29, a security camera caught him for the last time, a young man, and he did not arrive. The family by then had the door open. They were standing inside the room. Chapter 4, 137 Days. The investigation was conducted out of the Delegacia de Roubos e Furtos de Veículos in Rio. The case officer was Fabrício Sobreira. The delegado titular of the Polícia Civil do Acre, Alcino Jr., signed off on public statement. Interpol was notified. The Federal Polícia Federal was kept informed. The investigation worked the three obvious hypotheses. The first was voluntary departure. This is what the family believed from the beginning. Bruno had told his mother for years that he was working on something, that he had left the room as a kind of monument to what he had been writing. The disappearance in the family's reading was the dramatic last gesture of a long performance Bruno needed to be in control of. The part where the author steps off stage so that the work can be read. The second hypothesis was foul play. The Polícia Civil ran the standard procedure: cell tower records, bank records, searches of the friends' residences, searches of the forested perimeters around Rio Branco and into the surrounding Serengeti, a check of the Amazon river ports, a check with the Bolivian and Peruvian authorities of the two land borders. Dental records were on file. Nothing came back. The third hypothesis was a cult, a group that had drawn Bruno in, scripted the room as a recruiting artifact, and absorbed him. The police looked into the spiritist and esoteric communities Bruno had moved in, including a doctor named José Furtado de Medeiros, active in Rio Branco spiritist circles Bruno had consulted, and a childhood friend, Dalius Vasconcelos, who had helped Bruno with some of the code work. Nothing emerged. No group claimed him. No group was identified. What did emerge in a search of Marcelo Ferreira's house on the 31st of May, 2017? 3 contracts signed by Bruno, promising shares of the proceeds of the 14 books to Marcelo, Mario, and the cousin Eduardo. Messages on Marcelo's phone recovered by the police, in which he told the girlfriend that they were all gonna, the Carricos, get rich. The bedroom furniture in storage at Mario's, a timeline of pre-arrangements for publication. On the 1st of June 2017, the Polícia Civil do Acre publicly stated for the first time that there were strong indications the disappearance had been a marketing operation. The family rejected this immediately. Denise Borges told reporters, "This is not a marketing ploy. I already knew about the contracts. Those boys helped Bruno." Chapter 5, the Cipher. The Cipher. The family photographed the pages from the notebooks and the wall. They posted some of the photographs publicly on the 4th of April 2017 on a Facebook group called Bruno Borges Estudo. Within 10 days, the group had 10,400 members. On the 12th of April, a pair of programmers in Goiás, Igor Rincon and Renoir dos Reis, applied the visible keys. They reported they had broken 2 of the books in roughly 30 minutes. Their collaborative website received 70,000 visitors on a single day. What came out of the decryption was not coordinates, it was not instructions, it was not a coded confession. It was a philosophical manuscript in Bruno's voice, derived heavily from his reading. The recurring themes were Giordano Bruno's cosmology, the doctrine of an infinite universe filled with infinite worlds, the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, a kardecist, spiritist account of consciousness surviving the body, an account repeated in different forms of human beings as carriers of knowledge that they have forgotten and must, by inward labor, recover. The first volume, Bruno himself titled the Teoria da Absorção, do Conhecimento, Theory of the Absorption of Knowledge. It argued that all knowledge already exists in a universal field, and that the task of a human life is to absorb it through attention, reading, and inner stillness. None of it was occult in the operational sense. No rituals, no invocations, no instructions for harm. It was a manifesto for self-cultivation. It was, in places, simply a young man's reading notes, set down with a religious patience and an enormous quantity of paint. Brazilian philosophy professors who looked at the published Acre described it as derivative, structurally weak, and philosophically thin. Bruno was 24. The writing was earnest and, as a piece of philosophy, not very good. The Manual do Escoteiro Miri is the Portuguese translation of Disney's Junior Woodchuck's guidebook. Generations of Brazilian children read it in the 90s. It included a chapter on secret codes, Caesar shifts, simple substitutions, symbol alphabets, a few hours of intelligible difficulty. For a 9-year-old, Bruno had grown up reading the manual. The Cipher, the Polícia Civil, and the amateur cryptographers worked through in April was at base the Cipher system any Brazilian child of the 80s or 90s. Whoever wanted the secret diary already, he had taken something that belonged to childhood and used it as the carrier wave for a metaphysical claim. And the religion that underlaid the manuscripts was not ancient one. Kardecist Spiritism is the doctrine codified by the French educator Allan Kardec in 1857. In Brazil it has been for more than 100 years, a mass religion. The 2010 census recorded roughly 3.8 million self-identified spiritists. More than the entire country has Jews, Muslims, and Buddhists combined. The cultural footprint is much larger than the formal count. Most nominally Catholic Brazilian families keep a spiritist library on the side and consult mediums when someone died. The Borges household, by every indication, was one of those households. Denise Borges' Catholic devotion to Nossa Senhora Aparecida, and then the family's openness to Bruno's project are not in this culture intention. They are typical. What was idiosyncratic was not the content, it was the form, the size of the project, the locked room, the painted statue, the cipher, the pre-signed contracts, the disappearance. Chapter 6, Giordano Bruno, the decision to put Giordano Bruno in the center of the room rather than a crucifix or sigil or portrait of a living teacher is worth pausing on. It is the load-bearing aesthetic choice of the entire installation, and almost nobody in the new cycle that followed. Giordano Bruno, 1548 to 1600, a Dominican friar from Nola, near Naples. He spent his life moving between the courts and universities of Europe, teaching the art of memory, lecturing on cosmology. His central public position, the Copernican sun-centered system, did not go far enough. There was no center to the universe at all. The universe was infinite. The stars were other suns around each of them in an unbounded plurality were inhabited world. 20th century popularizers placed this at the center of his legacy, the lonely martyr of the open universe. The other parts of his thought are the hermetic and magical writings, a program for inner expansion, a soul that can take into itself the structure of the cosmos. Giordano Bruno was tried by the Roman Inquisition for 7 years, found unrepentant, burned at the stake at the Campo de' Fiori in Rome on the 7th of February, 1600. He is in 2026, still not rehabilitated by the Catholic Church. Bruno Borges shows this man on a plinth in monk's robe, holding an open book, dominating a small room. He did not choose the Bruno of the burning. There is no fire in the iconography of the statue, no Campo de' Fiori, no Inquisitor. He chose the Bruno of the open book, the teacher Bruno, the Bruno who held that anything could be put inside a single attentive mind. A 24-year-old psychology student, locking himself away to write 14 books, chose as his guardian the figure who had argued that the universe is that the soul can in principle hold it, and that the work of a human life is the work of holding more. This is either earnest or it is a very precisely chosen propaganda. The two readings are not, again, fully separable. They were not fully separable for Giordano Bruno himself, who was, among other things, a public performer of his own ideas. Chapter 7, The Return. The first volume of the 14 books was published 5 weeks before Bruno's return. The family, with the encouragement of editor introduction, signed a publishing contract for the first book on the 18th of June 2017. The introduction to talk was released free online on the 5th of July. The file was downloaded 15,000 times that day. The full book was released on the 20th of July. In the week of the 24th to the 30th of July, it reached number 20 on the Brazilian nonfiction bestseller list. On the 11th of August 2017, at 17:22 in the afternoon, Bruno Borges rang the bell at his parents. He had walked, by his own account, the last stretch barefoot. His feet were bleeding. He had lost roughly 13 kilos and was visibly dehydrated. There was nobody home. He sat on the step and waited more than an hour. A neighbor, Maria do Socorro, saw him and called the father. The doorbell footage was later released. Bruno is calm and quiet on it. He looks, if anything, embarrassed. He told the police at the interview conducted by Delegado Alcino Jr. on the 15th of August that he had disappeared of his own free and spontaneous will and was not coerced by any external. He refused to say where he had been. He has, to date, never said where he had been. He has said only that he was alone, or essentially alone, that he was not held by anyone, that he had on the 15th of August, Alcino Jr. closed the criminal aspect of the case. No charges, no further inquiry. The administrative finding by the Assessoria de Segurança Pública of the state of Acre formally recorded the case as a version of a planned marketing scheme. Bruno gained 13 kilos back and more over the next month. On the 28th of September, he opened the bedroom for paid guided tours, charging modest entry. He announced that there was material in his unfinished notebooks for 20 further volumes. He gave interviews calmly. He told Fantástico, "I expected the reaction to be different." Chapter 8, the meme. By the end of 2017, O Menino do Acre, the boy from Acre, was an internet now in Brazil. There were 2 mobile phone games, Encontro Menino do Acre. There were YouTube channels devoted to the Cipher. There were occult conspiracy theorists who insisted against the published decryptions that the books contained secret coordinates. There were skeptics who insisted against the apparent sincerity of the room, that the entire thing was a textbook stunt. The cipher had been broken, the contracts had been found, the bestseller list had been hit, the family's account and the police's account had failed openly to reconcile. There was nothing further the internet on its own could extract from the case. By 2020, it was a recurring nostalgia post. Vocês lembram do Menino do Acre? And not. In 2025, Bruno Borges resurfaced, but he runs an Instagram account called Viagem com Bruno, Travel with Bruno, with around 16,000 followers, and sells online courses in projeção astral projection. The course material draws on the same library as the manuscripts in the room, his namesake's cosmology, hermeticism, lucid dream practice. Revista Fórum covered the relaunch on the 28th of June 2025. But the article is gently skeptical. Bruno is articulate, healthy, and selling something. He does not, in his current public persona, address the 2017 disappearance in detail. He gestures at it as a formative period. Coda, the question the room outlives, mystery. The Antikythera mechanism has a clear single mystery: who made it and how. The Voynich manuscript has a clear single mystery. What does it say? Bruno Borges' case looks at first glance like it has the same shape. What do the manuscripts mean? And where did he go? But both of those questions have, in the ordinary investigative sense, been answered. The manuscripts mean what amateur decoders, professional reviewers, and Bruno himself have said they mean: a derivative philosophical spiritist manifesto, sincere in its esoteric framework, weak as philosophy. Where he went is open at the level of detail, but closed at the level of. He went away alone, came back alone, and refused to say more, which is the privilege of a free adult. The actual unanswered question is through phrase: was the room sincere philosophical artwork, or was it a staged commercial product? And given Bruno's stated reading of Giordano Bruno, does that distinction even hold? Giordano Bruno himself was burned for refusing to choose between metaphor and literal truth. His infinite worlds were both a cosmological claim and a theological argument, and an artwork of the mind all at once. Bruno Borges' Rome is, in one reading, another very good 24-year-old's homage to that refusal. In another, it is a marketing object deliberately built to be photographed and decoded and bought. Bruno appears, when he gives interviews, to believe that it was both, and to be slightly puzzled that the rest of us thinkers are different. The investigation closed and the readers moved on because the unsolvable part of the case is not a fact. It is a category, category. We did not find out whether Bruno achieved what he set out to do, because we cannot agree, watching from outside, on what counts as achieving it. The room is real, the books exist, they have been read. People who read them mostly did not become wiser. People who saw the photographs mostly remember the statue, not the text. Bruno on Instagram in 2025 is calm. The Polícia Civil do Acre is satisfied. His mother is satisfied. His readers are satisfied, or more often bored. There is no missing person. There is only a question in the air above the room of whether the room works. This channel is called The Quiet Hill. We come back to the things people did and the silences that grew around them. Subscribe, and the next one will find you. Until then, keep it in mind, the Bruno Borges room, and the question that 8 years on the room is still asking.